So I met Cornette through Barron's years and years ago. And Cornette used to send Barron's the weekly OVW TV. And Barron's was like, I don't know why I'm getting this. And I was like, oh, so you can give it to me. And so he would. So, like, in 01, 02, 03, every week I would have a copy of the OVW TV sent straight from Cornette.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so after he got his release, I would see him on indie shots, and I eventually told him like, oh yeah, Barron's used to give me those, those OVW tapes, like I was such a big fan of all that stuff. And so we became very cordial with each other, where like I would see Cornette and it was always, a good hug, and we would have a conversation just about whatever. Uh, and I would always try to pick his brain. I was controversial, absolutely. But I also think that's just part of who he is, right? That's where his money's made, in his controversy.
I mean, it's always been the Challenger promo 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's just kind of who Cornette is. He knows his role better than anybody, I think, in the history of pro wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows how to make money off playing that role.
Yeah.
But like when NWA started, Cornette was the color commentator, and I'll never forget the first day, the first set of tapings. I'm walking down the hallway, and he cuts a corner, and he kind of stops, and he goes, I can't get rid of you, can I? And I was just like, why would you want to get rid of me? And he was like, that's a very good point. I don't want to get rid of you. You get beat up very well. I'm like, thank you, Jim Cornette.
Say, that's a great compliment from Jim Cornette.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And like, there's been a ton of stuff like in Georgia where I've got to do matches where he's managed against me. And like we did an angle where like I stole his tennis racket. Like that's yeah, right. Like crazy stuff. Like that's not something I could have ever fathomed as a child. Like this is the dude that like he manages one of the best tag teams in the history of pro wrestling, and he's managing Yokozuna and Owen Hart, and like now he's at ringside yelling at me. Like, what is happening? But like I know some people don't like Cornette. I am not one of those people. He's always been very, very, very gracious with his time. He's always been super cool to me. And, he let me steal his tennis racket. So, well, what more can I ask for?
Was the tennis racket loaded, though?
No, it was an unloaded tennis racket. Yeah.
Didn't need to have something in it at that point.
Yeah, no, that's Sly Fox. He knew what he was doing.
With him, he's just, to me, regardless of your stance, and I think this is what people forget, it's okay if you don't agree with him. I'm sure there's stuff everybody, even his closest friends, won't agree with a lot of his takes. And, you can't deny how great he was as a performer. That's just my biggest thing.
Undeniable.
And even now.
Undeniable. Yes.
His wit is next level, too. Like, he's so sharp and quick with it.
And he's such a beacon. Like he just got so much knowledge of that territory system where like at the end of the day, people forget like he's a fan.
Yeah.
Like, like a lot of his perspective comes from a guy that's a fan that made a lot of money in pro wrestling.
That's why he's so opinionated
first. And that's the thing, and that's why he's passionate about it, because he cares, because that's his opinion. Whether you agree with it or not, it's very irrelevant. Doesn't matter. But he's free to have his opinion because he's been watching wrestling longer than 80% of the people have been alive.
Yeah.
All right. So like let him have this opinion. Whatever his opinion is, you don't have to agree with it. But he drops knowledge in his opinion too, or it's just like, I never looked at it that way before.
And even if you don't, like, just like that, even if you don't agree with every point he's making, and he has a very colorful way of expressing things. But if you can get
Yes.
past that, I mean, here's a guy who, he was a teenager doing photography in Memphis, and he's
Yes.
done every facet of the business. He's wrestled, he's booked, he's been on the writing team, he's been an on-screen figure, commentator, obviously the arguably top 3 greatest manager of all time. I
Yeah.
personally put Heenan number 1 always. I would say Heyman's probably number 2 or up there, and Cornette's right there too.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, and he's excelled in so many different avenues in pro wrestling. Like I can't say enough about Heyman. I can't, but I can't say enough about Cornette. And like I said, like I love whenever I get the chance to just sit down and talk that Smoky Mountain stuff with him. It's just so cool. It's this thing is like you can just give him a topic and say go and just sit back and listen. Yeah. And you just learn, right? Like I've been very fortunate to spend more time than your average human being with Jim Cornette, and every experience has been awesome.
That's great.